This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, the Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank. You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is... Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Leslie Cohen on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called My Ride or Die, and what a great feel-good story that you need, going into these days that are getting a little longer and brighter and hopefully happier as the world gets closer back to normal. But this book will definitely help you get there. My Ride or Die is available everywhere now when you're hearing this, and you can go grab a copy of it. Welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Leslie, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
So I don't think there was particularly like one moment, but I do remember as a child writing a lot of things down all the time. So I had like one of those journals that was like small and pink and had like a lock and a key attached to it, which I now think is really funny because like who was breaking into that thing? Nobody. I had a younger sister and I'm pretty sure she also could not have cared less what was inside of this journal. But yeah, so I remember having a bunch of those, like a stack of those journals, very high security items, and just writing everything down that ever happened to me, and eventually getting tired of handwriting everything and turning to like my big box of a computer and just starting like a Word document on there, and it was just hundreds of pages long, and it was like everything that was happening at school and what boys I had a crush on and like what my friends were up to and what was for snack that day. It was just an endless stream of documentation. And I was thinking about it the other day, like whatever happened to that thing, but I'm very glad that I have no idea what happened to that thing. If I read it now, it might be slightly interesting, but probably mostly mortifying and
right.
A bad trip backwards.
So you were blogging before blogging was cool.
I was. I had no readers or no subscribers, but I was keeping track of, all of the events. So I think that was like one big memory. And I also remember, do you remember the Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul books?
Oh, yeah.
So they were these really emotional stories about teenagers, and my mom bought them for me at some point, and I really liked them and thought they were like really deep and dark and awesome. And I think there was one at some point she got me that was called Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul Journal, where it was like Mad Libs almost, like you filled it in instead of reading about other people. And I was like writing off the page.
Oh,
like,
that is so funny.
Not a single square of blank space, because I was like, this is my time.
Do you think you inherited that from anyone? Was there anyone else in your life who was a writer or a journal keeper? Did that come from anywhere, or just it was just who Leslie is?
Well, my mom was definitely. She was more in the nonfiction. She went to college for journalism, and she ended up becoming a lawyer. But she is a really good writer. And whenever I would have anything to write for school, she took it really seriously. And like if I had to write a paragraph for driver's ed about why I wanted to drive, it was like started off with like it was a dark and stormy night. You know, it was a very artistic piece. Like anything that had to be written, whether it's papers, term papers, anything for school, she took it seriously. She marked it up. She used almost like a blood red pen, colored pen, I remember. And I would walk into the room while she was editing, and I could see from across the room how bad it was, depending on how much blood was on the page. So like when I first started writing essays, it was just a disaster. There were arrows, there were numbers, everything was pointed everywhere. And then like several drafts later, it looked a little cleaner and nicer, and I would just like breathe a sigh of relief. So I think, and she was always giving me books. And so I think that was a big influence on it.
So were you a bookish kid? Were you that kid that walked around with your nose in a book all the time?
For sure.
Other than your journals?
Yeah, no, for sure. I was always reading. She was always giving me books, and then I would take them to school. If I had I remember I had a bunch of friends leave. I had elementary school to middle school was a little bit of a difficult time for me because I had a bunch of friends leave in like 6th grade. And so in 7th grade and 8th grade, I didn't have too many people left over at the school who I was friendly with. And so I remember I would bring a book and I would sit by my locker during recess and read by myself, which now seems so sad, but you know, I feel like everybody has those stories where you had like that little moment in life where you really needed books more so than other times.
So Leslie, you when you finish school, you go to college, and if I'm not mistaken, you went to Columbia. Is that right?
Yeah.
And after Columbia, you wound up working for a newspaper in Colorado.
Yeah.
And then working in publishing. It sounds to me, looking back, that you are on a specific trajectory. Is that safe to say that you always knew that you were going to work in publishing of some fashion?
Well, that's just a little edited bio you have.
Of course.
But yeah, I was in the creative writing program at Columbia, and I was always writing and very interested in writing, but I didn't really see how to make it into a career at all. I knew nothing about publishing. I knew nothing about really like how do you make yourself a writer. I just knew I liked to write. And I remember I had one professor who I spoke to, and I was talking to her about all these different careers and what do I do? And she said, why aren't you considering being a writer? And it was just such a far-fetched thing to me, and just this abstract concept I could never actually do. And I said, oh, really? And she's like, well, I think you could do it. And I said, why? And she said, voice. She said, you have a good voice. And that was a really big moment for me where I thought, oh, okay, maybe I do have something. But then I got confused and frustrated and moved to Colorado to work for a newspaper, writing a music column, then moved back to New York, tried to get a job in music journalism in New York, which is a very difficult thing to do, as it turns out. And I didn't really know anyone at newspapers and magazines. And so I got frustrated, applied to law school, went to law school, still wanted to be a lawyer, still wanted to be a novelist while I was in law school, was like writing on the side, and then graduated and was like, I hate everything about this legal field, and I do not want to be a lawyer with novels under my desk. So pretty much as soon as I graduated, I started applying for jobs in publishing. And then once I was working in publishing, I was writing while I was at work, which you're not supposed to do, but it worked out. So, but yeah, so it was a little bit of there were definitely some detours. I feel like law school was a very expensive, very stressful detour, but it had to be done.
Well, you know, the circuitous route is sometimes the most interesting route. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I think it gives you a sense of perspective, right? I mean, when I was in publishing, I could have kissed the ground every day because I was so happy I wasn't working in a law firm, which I don't think I would have felt if I had gone straight into publishing. I would have wondered, well, what else is there out there? So
sure.
I think you have to try a few things to see where you land. So yeah, I think just to get a perspective and to feel like the contrast of one thing versus another.
So even though you didn't practice law or work in a law firm after that, do you, looking back now, having the benefit of hindsight, can you see that time studying law and going to law school has benefited you in any tangible way other than, like you said, having that experience now makes you really appreciate where you are now. Other than that, did that experience, give you any tools or any certain thing that you say, I'm happy I had that experience?
For sure. I mean, for one thing, I got my first internship in publishing just by chance. But when I got my first real job in publishing, it was reviewing contracts. And I wouldn't have gotten that job if I didn't have the law degree. And while I was reviewing contracts at Writers House, which is a literary agency in Chelsea in New York, I ended up working with one of the agents there on my writing. And the first novel that I wrote was set in a law firm. And I used tons of knowledge I was a summer associate for a couple summers at a firm. One of, to be sure, one of the worst summer associates in history. But while I was doing that, I learned a lot and I used it in the first novel I wrote, which didn't end up getting published, but the practice that I got writing the first one helped me to write the second one and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to look back and say, what would have happened if, and I kind of look at all those giant law books and I'm like, oh my God, that was a lot of work. But at the same time, you never know what led to what. And I'm grateful for having had that experience in a lot of ways, because I'm not sure I would have gotten that job at Writers House, and that job really presented a lot of opportunities for me.
For sure. Your first book that you did publish, This Love Story Will Self-Destruct.
Yes.
That was not your first novel that you had written, obviously?
No, it was the third, or I don't know. I did. So the first one I wrote while I was in law school, and then the second one I wrote while I was working in publishing, and then I revised that for a year, and that ended up almost being a whole different novel. And so by the time I got to This Love Story Will Self-Destruct, by the time I was writing that, I had really written 3 full novels that didn't go anywhere. And then when I wrote This Love Story, I was at the point where I was like, okay, I don't want to write about a law firm. I don't want to write about, what this X, Y, or Z thing. I just want to write what I want to write. And I just was very stripped bare of all of my concerns for what might sell and what was marketable. And I just wanted to write what I wanted to write and just went full steam ahead with it. So maybe that's why it ended up being successful, or maybe I just needed the practice. It's the first time you cook a dish, is it as good as the fourth time? No, so.
Right.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of 1 book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting, and we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. pub-site.com. the place to help authors find their home on the web.
Well, and when you've just written that novel and you're revising it and trying to get it out to people and get eyeballs on it, you're super close to that book. It's kind of the most important thing in the world. Now having the benefit of some space and time between those early books that you wrote, do you now are you able to look at them and say, okay, now I see what was wrong there.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I could revise that and bring it back out, or are you just happy to leave those in the past?
Well, certain aspects, sure, happy to leave in the past, but there are definitely things that there are things from those early versions that appear in this love story. There are things from the early versions that appear in My Ride or Die. There's definitely like aspects of those books that have remained. Should those books in their entirety have been published? Probably not, but they were really great practice, really necessary practice. And I'm like kind of an on-the-job learner, so I feel like it was just good for me. Like, I'm not a big outliner. I'm not a big, I just sit and write. And so I feel like I needed to sit and write to learn. And the people who helped me along the way, like my agent at that time or various editors who thought it showed promise, but said, fix this, fix that. All those little inputs here and there over time were what increased my skill. Definitely bits and pieces that I take with me, along with the advice, along with the edits. Everything comes with, but some things get left behind too.
At what point in this love story will self-destruct's journey did you know that this one was going to be different? That the story of this book was going to be different.
Like that it would
that this one was going to be published and it was going to have another life. And
I was just convinced because I needed to be convinced in order to have the stamina to write it. Like I needed to believe that it was going to get published. And I remember writing an email to my agent at the time in all caps saying, this one is going to get through. I dare them to reject it. And I was just very determined and made up my mind before I started writing. And then I was lucky enough that it happened. But I think you have to, or at least I have to, trick myself a little bit into feeling like whatever I'm writing is someday going to have an audience, because otherwise I just can't get out of bed in the morning.
Well, that book, went on to be published and find an audience, and a lot of people really love that book, and now you're following that up with your second published novel, My Ride or Die. Leslie, what is usually the first thing that comes to you when you start thinking about a new book project? Is it a character? Is it a setting? I love the beginnings of novels. It's like it's a form of magic almost, that one moment nothing about it exists, and then the next moment there's characters that start populating your mind, or a setting, and then it becomes this living, growing thing. What's that first moment of inspiration like for you?
Well, I think with this one, I had this idea of a bachelorette party gone awry. I had this idea of a girl climbing out the window of her own bachelorette party. And I had this also notion of like two friends who had been together since college, freshman year roommates. I feel like freshman year is a very vulnerable time, and you're thrown together with this other stranger. And so I thought the whole concept of having this friendship as the center of a romantic comedy, as opposed to a romantic comedy where the friendships are ancillary, I thought it would be interesting to flip the two. So the focus would be the friendship, and then you'd move outward from there.
Sometimes taking a common trope and just flipping it, and reversing the roles, or bringing a friendship to center stage as opposed to ancillary relationships, like you said. Sometimes they can just open up all the possibilities. When you did that, did you just start getting flooded with inspiration and I can do this or that, or how did that start to grow?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely the idea started from there. And then, yeah, I just thought about them getting older and forming this alliance. And then everything fell into place. And of course, I went back and changed things. And I think I spent 2 months just working on the first chapter alone, which is crazy because I normally just like am very, okay, moving on. But everything had to stem from this failed bachelorette party. And it had to hit all of the right notes. And I don't like to open a book on a down note. I wanted it to feel fun and exciting and to launch people into the story. And so getting that launch pad just right was very important to me and took a lot of time. But once that was in place, then a lot of things flowed from there, like a lot of the fun of the story. And my focus really the whole time, like it sounds cliche, but my focus the whole time was having fun, because maybe it's like the pandemic influence, maybe it's like, I don't know, just being home and like, I just like, I love a good distraction. So I just thought to myself, like, I love romantic comedies, but I hate cliche ones, not because they're stupid or anything, just because I'm bored if I know what's going to happen and if I've heard it 100 times before. And so I just, I love like a great romantic comedy and like a classic one that doesn't just, oh, it's just for this time period or this age group. So I always try to stay true to the form in the classic sense, because there's a reason why it is the way it is. But then I do my own little twists on everything. And I just like to think, okay, what would be the expected thing here? And let's push it and like do something different or do something crazy or ridiculous or funny, like, but in small ways, not necessarily in like, everyone's underwater and the whole thing takes place in Morocco, like it's just in like more subtle ways, but still with keeping the structure where like there's an exciting beginning and there's an obstacle and there's a happy ending, maybe, so like I like to keep the feel good aspects of the romantic comedy while making it a unique story where you don't know what's going to happen.
Sure. Amanda and Sophie are two great protagonists. You talked about that first month of really getting that first chapter right, and revising and thinking of different ways to to shape the beginning of the story. How much of that time went into Amanda and Sophie, and what was your process for really building them out as characters?
Well, my approach to them was I wanted them to be different, but I didn't want it to turn into The Odd Couple, where it was like one was the straight guy and one was the mess, one was the conservative one was the wild one. I do think that dynamic does exist in real life, and I certainly have it with my own friends, where one of us is more this and one of us is more that, and like I think the contrast makes for a good yin yang, a good banter, all those things. So my focus was to have them have that, but to also each have moments of being more conservative, more wild, more free, just not have them fall into categories.
So the idea of the book is that we've got these two young women who are, just kind of sick of the expectations that are put on them and how life is supposed to go, and they decide that instead of pursuing, what we think of as the trajectory for everyone's life through their 20s and 30s, that they're going to commit themselves to each other and to their friendship as opposed to their love life, if you will. When you came up with that premise, did you have any idea how the book was going to end and what their path was going to be as you began working on it?
No, actually, I think I had some sense of what a cool ending might be, but as I worked on it, I realized that ending actually doesn't make sense, like, which often happens. Like, oftentimes I'll have an idea of where I want to go, and then I'll realize, oh, that's not exactly right. But I think I I had the setting and the feel, like the mood of the last scene before I knew any of the details. So it was just a matter of getting to that point. But it's hard to decide all the details ahead of time, because it just, I don't know, the characters, I feel like, take you on a certain journey and they change over time. And but I did have a general idea of what would be like a cool ending scene that kind of ended up being the ending, but not exactly the way I envisioned it.
Do you consider yourself a pantser or a plotter? Like how much of I know what you said about the, really working on the beginning and making sure you had that opening right. But how much of a plan did you have for the rest of the book?
I had a loose outline of like what I thought might happen in every chapter, very, very vague, but I end up changing. Like I just really have to like dig in and be in the text, and see where it goes, because I come up with ideas. Like when I'm sitting in front of an outline, I don't really get inspired, but when I'm writing and I'm like giving the characters dialogue and description, that's when I come up with stuff. I'm very like bad at coming up with ideas when I'm in front of like a sterile outline. So I usually just dive in and see what happens, but it's good. I've learned over time that it's good to have some, general flags that you want to hit. So yeah, I had this idea that they would go to this destination and then maybe they do that. And then that changes over time.
Working in publishing, Leslie, did that do anything to what you thought of the publishing industry as someone who loved books and loved storytelling the way that you did? Did working in the industry, was it sort of like a Dorothy and Oz, pulling the curtain back and seeing, the machinery of it? Did that do anything for, what you thought of publishing and what you thought of yourself as a writer?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was very interesting. I mean, I spent the first year of my internship at a literary agency reading slush, which are just manuscripts sent in. And it was interesting to me to read those, to see agents' responses to things, to see what did get through, what didn't, why. I was very much behind the scenes at an agency while trying myself to find an agent, which is a bit awkward and can be frustrating. And like oftentimes I found myself in a situation where I was working with an agent in my own office, which has its ups and downs. Like it's nice because you can keep track of them and like sort of see what they're up to, but it's also anxiety producing because sometimes you want to just write and step away and you don't want to know, oh, they're on the phone doing a deal for somebody else. Are they reading mine? And, you're a little too close. But I did that for so long that I kind of got used to it, but it is nice to have a little bit of distance from one's agent per se. But no, I mean, I think I learned a lot from that. I think it also caused me a bit of anxiety just because you're around books, you're seeing, you're not in your own little vacuum of like, I'm working on this and that's all there is. You see other people selling books, which you think, oh, this book is not as good as mine, but they sold theirs and why haven't I sold mine? Whereas if you're at home with your laptop, you don't have exposure to those things. But at the same time, you learn from that as well. So it was a mixed bag. I still feel like, even though I've worked at two different agencies, I still feel like I have no idea what goes on at publishing houses. Even though I've had two publishers, I still feel like that's a total mystery to me. And I would love to be a fly on the wall for like their meetings. So I don't know. But in terms of the agent part of it, yeah, I do feel like I learned a lot and it maybe informed some of my decisions. But I don't know. At the end of the day, like it's really all about your work and the value of your work, and none of the rest really matters. It's all just kind of noise.
Well, My Ride or Die is out, available everywhere now. When you're hearing this episode, we're going to put links in the show notes where you can grab it in Kindle edition or paperback or audiobook. Leslie, what do you think about your books being interpreted as audiobooks?
Well, it's a little weird just because I don't listen to audiobooks myself, and I've never even listened to the audiobook for this love story because it just sounds so strange to me because I hear it in my own voice. But, for people who love audiobooks, I'm glad there's an option for them. But I'm just more of a real physical book person myself. So.
Gotcha. Well, for however you like books, you can grab it today. When you're hearing this, it's available everywhere. Leslie, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram. My handle is Sorta Funny Story, SORTAFUNNY story. I don't know how much of that I have to spell, but anyway, yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and I love to hear from people, how they like the book, etc. So that's always like a really fun, rewarding part of the job.
Great. We'll link those up as well to make it easy for people to connect with you. Leslie, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com. Are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection. Write from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers.